I'm Dawn Johns. I'm the Executive Director of Potomac Case Management Services, and happy to introduce our guest speaker for today, Cheryl Scrivener. Cheryl is a board-certified massage therapist, has her own business in her home, has had that for 12 years, and I will let her tell you the story of how she became and why she became a massage therapist. Prior to that, she was an associate professor and clinical instructor at HCC in their radiography program. She is a very caring individual. She is always reaching out to others who need help. You would never know on the surface what her life is like day to day. She masks that, quite honestly. So I think you're gonna really love hearing from her today. Last year we heard from Melissa Lynn, who had, a very, kind of heartwarming message, and I think you'll feel the same. The other thing I'm gonna go ahead and preempt you with is Cheryl is very interested in starting a caregiver support group. I've already talked to some of you in the room, and you too are interested in something like that. So that will be probably a little lunchtime conversation that she'll join you with. So let's welcome Cheryl Scrivener.
I'm excited to be here because you have many different reasons for it, right? Obviously having to do with caregiving. And guess what? We are not alone. We're here to support each other. I don't hide my need to slow down very well, but I'm glad you're here today, and I look forward to learning some things with you. And certainly feel free if you have questions or comments, anything, please feel free to speak up. All right? How many of you are truly caregiving for someone right now? Fantastic. And so for those of you who are, thank you for being here. And for those of you who aren't, I'm glad you're here. Because one of the things to remember is that as hard as it is at times, it's very good to try to think a little bit ahead. But sometimes that's not always possible. All right. Well, let's see if I can figure out oh, that's a laser. All right, okay, see, I had a feeling this might happen, but that's okay. There we are. So, next. Let's see. All right. So thank you very much for being here, and I want to thank Potomac Case Management, of course. Thank you very much for your very, very generous contribution to this, and Brooklyn as well. So, what does it take to become a caregiver? How do we get there? Well, you're right. It is not always planned, okay, but it can be. Caregivers can be put in situations spontaneously, but they can decide to do that for their livelihood, which I think is a tremendous gift to anyone, and I just commend those that decide to devote their lives to such a wonderful field. I think it's a difficult one, and I'm learning firsthand that yes, there are plenty of challenges with that. So you can do it as an occupation or career. I certainly had a responsibility for being a caregiver because of two family members who have had diseases and continue to have diseases. One is still alive and one has passed. And also, care recipient needs short-term support sometimes. We have a family member presently who's in transitional type of care. And so these needs are going to be different depending on what level of care that you need to provide. And it's all very important. Whether it's when you first find out, you may be diagnosed with something right up until the end of life issues. It's very, very paramount. I'm thinking I'm hitting the right button, but maybe I'm not. Let's try the arrow. Okay. Yeah, so obviously mine was unplanned. Absolutely. My husband, and I apologize, but I can't seem to figure out which button is might be easier to do this manually. Let's see. Oh, there we go.
Where you
yeah, the arrows. Yeah,
the arrows.
Yeah. Thank you. So my husband's name is Bill. He's presently 57. And he was diagnosed with primary progressive MS in the winter of 1991. He was 26 years old at that time. My mother, her name is Nancy, and she, at a time later in life in her early 60s, was diagnosed with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. And she had her first symptom in spring of 2002 and passed away in our home 2 years later. Okay, so what does caregiving look like? Does it look like this? Yes, everything is so peachy, right? Yes, I am a fairly positive person, but I'm also a realist. And so yes, there are times when we're calm and we can manage a smile and we're okay. And other times you're like, you know, you want to just pull your hair out because you're thinking, wow, that was unexpected, or what have you, or you're just tired or exhausted. So we go through different emotions with this, and I think what's important is that you think about all the different ways that you have to caregive. When you think about things like helping with, they call them ADLs, or helping with daily activities, we think of things like, yeah, normal things that you normally do every day. Get dressed, take a shower, use the toilet, brush our teeth, eat a meal. You know, things that are truly, critical to our survival, pretty much. But we also can do things as caregivers like, yes, organizing logistics, trying to manage a day, a schedule, providing transportation and thinking about, am I going to be able to put them in my car? Do I need to purchase a handicap accessible vehicle? Wow, that could be a financial nightmare. And what do we need in order to get them from point A to point B? Things like preparing meals. You know, all of these things take time, right? They take time. So it's stressful. It's very stressful. I think that with my husband's illness, it was more predictable once he was diagnosed how things may progress, but really what I'm saying is I had more time perhaps to cope with his illness over time, simply because it's been a long journey. But it's still unpredictable at times. Of course, my mother's diagnosis was much quicker, and so we had to do things differently for her. And we were very, very thankful that resources also understood that. So basically, caregiving, we want to provide support. We want to increase their quality of life. Well, our quality of life tends to shift, maybe in the opposite direction at times, naturally. So is it easy? There are moments when it is. Honestly, there are moments when it is. But most of the time, it is difficult. And I knew that it eventually would probably change my reality as I knew it. It influences everything. It impacts your behavior. Are you in a good mood today? And I hope so. My emotions, your relationships with people. It physically affects you, right? We think we perhaps can do more physically than we can. Maybe we think, well, they're only 90 to 100 pounds. I can just transfer them from the bed to a chair. And we might not always be cognizant of how this may be affecting us physically, but it does impact. What do these changes feel like? How do we cope with them? Basically, I met my husband. We were both just peaking 21 years of age. I was at Hood College working on my undergraduate. My husband, was at University of Maryland. He was a rugby player for Maryland. Oops. Trying to go backwards here. Oops.
I think you're going forward.
Thank you. I'll figure forward and back at some point. It still goes forward no matter which arrow I put. Interesting. That's okay. But yeah, slow down, that's really important. Let's just slow down for a moment while we figure this. A student at Maryland. Thank you.
That's what he wanted.
She's so good at this. I'm a little out of touch with it. Thank you.
Do you want me to just?
Yeah, that'd be awesome. And, you know, he took the rugby team to the United States Championships on the Eastern Division. So when I met him, he was a, strapping 6'5", 220, and I thought, wow, this guy's way out of my league. But very, very sweet man. Even his fraternity would not haze him. He was like daddy apple pie, nobody bothers Bill. But he's a very kind person. He was very confident, he still is. And he was having some symptoms while we dated. And they weren't a big deal, we didn't think. He had some ankle weakness. He would occasionally trip when he was playing sports. And maybe a little vision trouble, but he chalked it up to something that Hopkins had called stress in his preteen years, which he was not a stressful person by nature. But back then they didn't have MRI and other things to diagnose back then either. So I ended up getting recalled at Bethesda Naval Hospital. I put a little time in with the United States Navy Reserve. And when he was diagnosed, I had been recalled to Operation Desert Shield Storm, so I was down at Bethesda Naval Hospital. And my husband and I were fortunate enough to be able to take a small vacation, not outside the continental United States, to the Virgin Islands, and we were running together on that island while we were on vacation, and he fell flat on his face. How humiliating is that, right? Because here's a man who's thinking he's in control of everything. And I think he'd been in denial a little bit, maybe we both were. And we decided at that time that he needed to come to Bethesda, and let's see what's going on. So the blessing in disguise is resources became right at our fingertips. My husband was a cancer researcher at Fort Detrick in Frederick, and he ended up knowing a lot of people at NIH right across the street from Bethesda Naval Hospital. I'm like, thank you, Lord. Things have a way of working out sometimes, but I'm not saying that that means that because things go the way you plan, that means that the universe is helping you. There's a lot to that on both sides. But the feelings that we had at the time were, my gosh, anxiety, fear, and quite frankly with me, confusion, I don't even know really what MS really is. And now he's got the central nervous system disease, and wow, this is obviously going to affect our lives. So I had to prepare for that caregiver role. And yes, Googling was my start. Educating ourselves, what is MS? All kinds of questions. We need to understand this disease. And so we got involved with the MS Society. Like many Alzheimer's Society, there's a lot of associations for different disability associations and support groups and caregiving associations. The MS Society was very, very supportive. And so we decided we put some volunteer time in. We started the walk in Westminster, Maryland for Carroll County back, I don't know, early 90s, Lisa? My sister-in-law Lisa's here, thank you for you. And then family also then started a walk in Hagerstown. That has done well since as well. So that's a way to cope, isn't it? Getting involved in the community somehow and giving back and trying to see how we can kind of support research, raise some money, and try to help learn about the disease and what we can do to make sure that their lives are protected. So we kept moving forward, and I was sort of driven, if you will. And I thought, we're going to be okay. We're going to be all right. He has this disease. That means I really have to step up my education. I'm going to, I'm thinking, 10 years ahead, which isn't always a healthy thing to do. We had 2 beautiful children back in the early 90s. We were able to move from Carroll County to Hagerstown. And our home, fortunately, was, for the most part, accessible. So that was one challenge we did not have, which was amazing. As a person who was recalled, of course, I wasn't working as an X-ray tech at the time at Sinai Hospital, took a break. When we ended up moving to Hagerstown, his health continued to worsen. I then now have taken on responsibilities as part-time clinical instructor for HCC, enjoyed it very much, and I'm thinking, all right, we're going. HCC, I'm going to retire there. I can take care of this. we'll have 2 insurances. Yeah, of course I had the grand plan, right? But what was being compromised? My kids were going, "Where's mom?" My husband's health, who at the time was failing a little bit quicker than I was, maybe even noticing, who's taking care of him? We don't have a caregiver, and so forth. So things just kept moving forward. Well, how far is it going to go before you decide enough is enough? We can't keep doing this. So really change was truly inevitable. So let's think about this a little bit. Let's see. Oh, well, and of course, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention. So when we're home, Bill is doing okay, but his health is failing. The kids are preteens, and I'm working full-time. One of our colleagues at HCC had moved on to another position, and now I'm taking over theirs, and it's just kind of getting very stressful, right? Very stressful. So as we turned out, I decided we needed to make some changes with my career. I took a semester off of HCC, tried to decide where Bill was with his disease and where we all were with other dynamics. And as it works out, I decided because my mother had moved in and was benefiting from some massage, and my husband was benefiting from massage, I didn't really know what I was doing, but touch was important. Touch was important. And it helped them. It kept their depression a little bit lower. It gave them some senses of comfort, and it connected us in a way that maybe at times when stress was there were disconnects. So I thought, well, maybe I guess I'll go to massage therapy school, and so I did that, graduated, and eventually worked into being able to have my own office at the house, as well as an office outside of the house. And so that has been a real godsend, because now I'm home more. Sure, that adds a different level of stress, but I'm really glad I'm home. That helped me to feel a little bit more connected. And so they benefited, I benefited, and yes, I took a pay cut. This is a financial situation, right? But things are about risks in life. And you have to kind of decide, well, what's really important? And for me, where I was, I felt that this was the best choice, at least for now. And yeah, I think that sometimes we focus on what we think we need, but it's amazing how much you realize you don't need when push comes to shove and you really, really get down to what's truly important. So we try not to think about things we don't have to think about as much in terms of that. So how do we cope? Well, these are the normal ones, right? Yeah, they're bodily, right? We need to take care of that. And
I think maybe what was happening, now what? I'm thinking maybe the batteries are going to.
Well, how can I use
You can also use the mouse.
Can I use the mouse? All right. I can kind of maybe turn this way. Maybe kind of give you a side shot here a little bit. Let's see what previous looks like.
No, don't. Oh.
She's got
We
the
want
touch.
now that-
Definitely has the touch.
Is that where you want to be? Slow down?
Well,
Or
there
were
were,
you already there?
that's okay. There were a few things before, but we'll follow.
Is that where you want to be? I'll take this.
We'll follow. So how do we cope? All right. There are some strategies. Change is overwhelming, and I tend to do too much at once. I've learned that about myself over the years. I'm an overachiever. Cheryl can do it all. I'll be fine. Right? Well, what's that really called? It's called self-denial. It's called anxiety. It's called my way of protecting myself, in a way. And that's not healthy for me or anyone else. And so I was rushing and hit myself, or hurt myself, and that was a wake-up call too. I thought, Cheryl, you want to keep going, and you just have to slow down. You've got to calm down. Well, Bill has been wonderful. he is the kind of man who takes things in stride. Has it always been easy? No, it hasn't. And there are certain things that I want to share with you that I think are really, really important for the sake of you know, where we are and the lessons that we can learn from it. When you're thinking about what you need, I think it's really important that you find someone who you trust, right? Someone who can give you their ear, their non-judgmental, active listening skills, who has no real stake in what you're going through. And I know that may sound a little strange when I say has no stake, because I think family is amazing. Unconditional love, support is very important. But when you need to get away, you need to be able to help yourself, right? And that's why I'm so excited that we're going to start hopefully a caregiver group. That would be fantastic. What you need to do also, and let me see if, yeah. Well, let's go back a little bit. Okay, keep going back. Yep, slow down one more, yep. Good. Basically, these are some too, these are good, thanks. So, taking time for hobbies. So, slowing down, taking time for hobbies, getting someone you trust to talk to, because you may not want to do this alone, or you want to be able to have someone there. Be forgiving. There's moments when that may be difficult, especially if you have symptoms with someone and you know that you expect them to behave a certain way and then now they're not, and maybe that will trigger you. Communicate your feelings. You know, being open about it is really important. Practicing mindfulness. Asking for support. You know, fantastic. Accept what you cannot control. You know, you want things to turn out right. You'd like to make sure things are in place, you know, your space is reorganized, whatever it is, and suddenly you're thinking, I can't control the illness. You know, so there's certain things you have to be able to give away, and just let go, All right, good. So slow down. Personal examples of coping strategies. Thank you. All right. So personal examples of coping strategies. When you're at home, one of the things that I have found is that in my space, it takes me, and I counted seconds one time. I have the trash can in the kitchen that has to sit out here because we have a mouse problem under the sink sometimes, right? And there's a counter, and then there's the area here where we're eating and taking care of things. And every time something has to be thrown away, I walk over here and throw it away, and then walk back over here. And I thought to myself, Cheryl, start looking at some of those little things that take you time to do. Is there a way that you can rearrange space in such a way that you're not doing this and getting 3 things done, but you're going like this and getting 15 things done? Easier said than done, right? But think about maybe where things are when you need them. Supplies, you know, that are near wherever your person receiving care is in the home. Very important. Trying to keep things clean is not always easy. Again, that's another chore, right? That's another chore. But these things can help manage that. All right, so let's see. We mentioned things about being realistic, getting in touch with local agencies, things like that. A confidant could be a family member, but it could also be someone who is a professional, right? Someone who you can go to professionally. I have a therapist. I've had a therapist for years. And it's been tremendous because if I have a concern, question, I need to talk out an emotion or figure out how to solve a problem, it's an amazing thing to have. Affordable, not always. That is a challenge. And so I don't go maybe as often as some, but I try to plan out my, if you will, homework in between visits and thinking about questions that I might have and writing them down. And then that way I have a reference for when I need that. Getting creative. All right, let's move forward just a little. Of course, this I guess is creative. This is my family. My husband, my daughter Ellie, That's me, and then her boyfriend, Alec. My son just happened not to be in the picture, but he, of course, is part of the family, too. There are moments when, no, I'm just kidding. This hiking, you know, there's things that you can do for yourself for respite for yourself. Hiking, doing something you find a passion for. For me, it happens to be connecting with nature. I really appreciate doing that. This is in Smithsburg, a little bit near Buzzard Knob. And there's this spider, and sun's coming down, and he's actively making this web. And I thought that reminds me of life. You know, we have layers, we have projects that seem like, wow, that's gonna take a while. I went up to the top of the hill and came down, and it was finished. I was very impressed, and I thought, life is like that. You know, it's a process, and it may never be a finished product visually looking like something pretty, but it's an amazing thing. It's warm, the colors are beautiful, there are things that can help restore our soul, and so that's important too. Reach out for help. Reach out for help. For about 25 years, I really wanted a fire pit, and my husband really wanted a fire pit. So we thought, well, I don't know how to build one, and I really can't afford to build one, right? And so we reached out some friends, and we were able to work out a really neat, you know, thing where someone happened to have extra fire bricks, and somebody else happened to have some pavers, and I helped, and I made a big meal, and fed them well, and contributed a little bit financially, but we ended up being able to get something. It doesn't have to be a fire pit, it could be anything. But there are people who are willing to help. And when they say, we want to do this for you, learn to say thank you, which was hard for me to do for a long time. Oh, I'm fine, I don't need anything. Okay. Think out of the box. What do you think this is about? Sorry. Got water dripping down my face. Now I need a tissue. So this is, we were down at Georgetown with Dr. Carlos Mora, who's the head of the MS clinic down there. We were saying, Dr. Mora, my husband's in a wheelchair. He's just always in a wheelchair. You know, he's basically, he's not ambulatory. So I want him to stand. I want him to stand. And I don't know how to do it anymore. We've used walkers with dead end. He's continuing to decline, but we need to have him up just to give him something different. We happen to have a beam in our house that's about 8 feet high. And so I started asking around, who can help me figure out how to put something together? So a friend of mine had a pulley. I went to Lowe's and bought a ratchet, and someone else had a hiking harness, thank you, harness that they use. And so we put it up here, and we got him up, and he's 6'5", and I was so excited, and I'm like, he's 6'5". Darn, because that whole thing took him back down to maybe 5 feet. But he was up, right? He couldn't, you know, swing his legs, but it was a start. And I thought, okay, we got to build on that. And we still will sometime, but you know, it looks weird, but you try to come up with things that you think are going to work. Well, that's me. This isn't about me. But this is just protect your hobbies. Do what you like to do. I enjoy my chainsaw. Bill likes to be out there supervising, so I'm all for it. So caregiving is important. It really is. And it's wonderful when you can have caregiving at the house. We are fortunate that we have some ability to have caregiving at the house, thanks to family support. I certainly can't afford it on my own, by any stretch. Limited number of hours a week, but you know, Bill is happier. This is my husband in the chair. This is Kiki, who's with us maybe 6 hours a week right now. What Kiki did, which I thought was neat, is she has a son who passed away, and she bought a memorial, she created a memorial in her own backyard. And I thought that's a really interesting concept. When you have someone who's struggling or is sick, maybe dying, is ill, perhaps especially the long term, and eventually, you know, dies, what can we do in their honor? How can we keep their, memory alive? And I just thought that was a really neat thing she did. Would I have time to do that? I looked at it and went, wow, I don't perceive being able to do it. I was amazed that she could, but she had her family engaged, and they created this, and they brought things in that belonged to her son, and different notes and things so that her grandchildren would not forget him. I thought that was neat. Another picture of hiking, which just helps us to feel, at least me, respite, finding a place in peace in nature. This is our dogwood tree. It's a dogwood tree in the driveway, and it fortunately is healthy, but it reminds me of life, that life is fragile, and that if we take care of something well enough, it will blossom and bloom and thrive. Even under circumstances of illness, you're right, we can't cure things sometimes, but we can try our best to keep things as healthy as possible. And you've got to remember to take care of yourself. I'm getting gray, and I thought, okay, Cheryl, you just need to take care of yourself. This is a picture of me actually getting my hair dyed. But the point there is, don't ignore yourself. Don't ignore yourself. Make time for you. Make time for you. All right. It's important to try to get them being involved in what you do when you can. Can't always happen, right? So engaging them and doing activities that are fun, get a little sunlight on the face if they can get outside. If not, maybe light therapy, some other things that might make them kind of feel like they're involved and feeling like they're part of a little more of a normalcy. Sometimes we just want to hide, and sometimes we need a safe haven, right? I was mowing the grass, and this toad, I don't know if you can see him, is actually sitting in the bough of one of our trees. And that was just such a nice little gift. There was a moment there that I thought, wow, that's a moment of peace for me. And so it was nice to see that. And sometimes we just need it. Share your resources. If you have a handicap accessible van, it'll take a while to pay off, but we finally have one. And share it with those who may need it. If you're not driving it, perhaps part of the connection of others in the community, you can combine your resources and be able to be a little more efficient, and it might save you a little time, connect you with people, and bring some of these individuals together, which I know sounds challenging. It is. It's not an easy thing to do. All right. And remember that life is beautiful. My husband loves flowers. I love flowers. And it's important that, again, that you take care of yourselves. You take care of yourselves. Love life. All right. I wanted to also tell you that, sometimes you have to expect the unexpected. We know that, right? My husband one time was found out on, I didn't know it till I got the phone call. I was teaching at the college, came out of class, and my colleague came in, Dawn, and she said, Cheryl, I just got a phone call from the Hagerstown police, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, my kids, what's going on? And she said, your husband has been found almost 20 miles from your home on Route 40 in his power wheelchair. And I'm thinking, okay, no, we didn't have a caregiver at the time, right? My husband is now saying, I'm going to see what I can do. We have this chair, I'm going to just see how far I can get, He got far. And then, of course, my colleague Dawn said, well, I asked him if he'd get in the van, and she told me he always learned that he wasn't supposed to get in it from a stranger. Okay. You have to laugh at those moments because they're stressful at that time, but then you go, wow. Well, now what am I going to do at home to keep him in the house when there isn't someone else there? So we came up with an idea of, maybe we'll make a tasteful sign, and we'll even ask my husband, Bill, how do you want it worded? Because we don't want him to feel like we're powerhousing or that he's feeling humiliated because he has to have a reminder on the door that says, please don't leave until you consult an adult or get somebody to come over, and then you may go out. So we did that, and it was interesting because it worked half of the time. And the other half, you know he's thinking, I can still go out. And he did, and he's all right. But then he ended up on our porch one time, and then thank gosh we had big cannas growing along the side of this, our porch that cushioned him as he carefully fell over because he was wanting to weed. That was his way of wanting to contribute, right? And I'm like, dang on it, if the weeds weren't so tall, he wouldn't have been tempted. But there he was, poof, and I went out and I see a chair and I don't see him. So now I'm like, oh, where is he? And I went, oh, hi Bill. You're all right? And he was literally laying on these leaves of cannas, completely suspended from the ground, which was just a miracle, and just sitting there. And he went, the sun's great. I am so glad. So of course, then I can't get him out of there. So yes, you have to, of course, have someone come, with an ambulance and so forth, and pick him up and put him back on the chair. But these things happen, trial and error. But they teach you lessons, and then you decide, okay, really got to get pickets out there at some point, or figure out a way to make sure that he's supervised. So those things are really, really important. And my husband is a pretty easy person to get along with, but he is very high need at this point. And I say that lovingly. We use a Hoyer lift now in the house, so that I'm not doing that transferring anymore, which was not very smart of me to do for as long as I did. And he's very grateful for whatever we have. You don't always have someone, though, I wouldn't think, that would manage it as easily. I said, sweetheart, with all due respect, if I were the one in that chair, I don't think you would really be very happy with me. But we don't really know until we're there how things kind of go, But, this is something that is very important to me to tell you. And that is that don't be afraid of your feelings, right? Don't be afraid to cry, even if maybe you're not one prone to do that, but it's really okay. You've got to release some of this stuff somehow, right? You want to try to keep it healthy ways to cope, right? So don't be afraid of your own feelings. Allow yourself, the ability to just simply, be able to let go, be able to get that out, be able to feel like, I have someone to talk to, I have a therapist to talk to, I have myself, I can meditate, but let tears flow if they need to. Because there's something to be said about not bottling things up. Because I bottled things up one time. Now, I bottle things up occasionally anyway, right? But this time was a little different. I've been still working at the college, and my husband, happy, pretty easygoing, got home, and I was just frustrated. I can't even tell you what it was about right now, but obviously I was just needing to just talk about it, right? So I start going, and I am anticipating, which was very weird when I think about it, that he would respond normally to me, right? But he was far enough along in his disease that cognitively, he wasn't quite seeing what I needed, right? But yet I had the same expectation of him at that moment because I wasn't happy that I had before he was truly having problems that were severe enough that it changed how he's processing information. So I'm in there and I'm just kind of going, I'm getting louder, louder. And I'm thinking, Cheryl, here's the bull in the china cabinet coming out again. And I'm like, I just want to ugh. And then I start yelling at him. Now I'm trying to blame him. I'm blame shifting, right? So I'm irrational at this point. Now, I certainly would never physically hurt my husband, but I certainly verbally probably gave him fear. And finally, my husband, I'm thinking, he's calm. He's not going to get upset. I'll unload. Life will be better. And he literally stopped and he turned around and goes, why do you have to be such a B word? Now, my husband has never sweared at me in our entire marriage. He's certainly not called me anything, right? And the weird part of it, that moment was, it didn't bother me that he said it. And then I started to laugh. And to grow from that. Life is not always easy. It's complicated. The kids have done well with it. They were forced to grow up faster than they wanted to, especially when I was working full time and they had responsibilities at the house. But yes, it was always difficult for me to allow them to get too close to Bill. You mentioned about things with how you're caregiving, things you're doing inside, you know, in that room. You know, do I really want them changing his Depends? Changing a catheter? You know, that's hard for me, really hard for me. And my kids, now that they're 26 and 28, say, Mom, you know, there comes a time when we're gonna have to just be on the same page with this, right? And then I'm just like, okay, all right, but yeah. So, you know, you try to find those places, but it's nice, you know, when the kids can understand and do what they can to help. But yes, my goal is always not to involve them to the point where, you know, but there may be moments when they have to. And actually, my daughter came up the other day and she said, Mom, you do know I've been doing that for a while now, right? I'm like, oh, yeah, thank you. I'm glad that, you know, you're all right? I'm fine, I'm fine. Mom, we just, yeah, this is our reality, we gotta deal with it. Thank you, sweetheart, okay. So then Cheryl has to go, let it go. Let it be that way. Don't try to control that. I think the only thing, when it's important we set boundaries for ourselves, you know, I say, well, how am I going to figure out how to keep my head on as a spouse, and then change my hat and have the head on that's the caregiver? And how can I try to keep those roles at least a little bit separate, so that I can enjoy both, and so can he, right? And so the one thing that's hard for me personally is, you know, when you get really down and you're trying to caregive, there's certain things that are hard for me to do. Because, and I say to myself, are you being fair? I'm like, yeah, I think I am. Because as long as I have at least someone to help me, or I won't have to do that particular function, those particular functions, then I can kind of keep that line divided properly. But it's never a clear, it's not a clear line. And when you love someone, you know, you're gonna go the extra mile and know that it's for the right reasons. But sometimes psychologically, you know, we want to try to maintain a little bit of sense of normalcy that way, and that might be a way to cope with that too, if you can. So where do we go from here, right? There are things that happen that continue to decline, right? With Alzheimer's, MS, other diseases. At some point, you know, where do you decide that you really need to do something for yourself? And I don't mean just a little bit. I'm still needing to do this myself. But where you truly have to say, how can I truly separate myself for a short period of time to the point where I'm doing nothing? Can you do that? Do you think you could do that? Honestly? I think that you have to somehow come to terms and decide for yourself that this is important to do. This is important to do. And you don't have to go far. I like my garden, I like to hike, I try to get away, but you know what? There's something that I struggle with all the time, guilt. I just went on a hike and my husband can't even walk. I can't find a place to go except Cunningham Falls that has a nice handicap walk, but I mean, you know, you really can't bring him up the side of a mountain, you know, and this is a man who did a lot of things in his youth. So I've had to learn not to feel guilty, and sometimes you may run into family or friends or your network that might think it's your responsibility to always be there for them. You know, you're married, this is your son, daughter, this is your, you know, mom or dad, this is, you need to be there, right? But you've got to set those limits for yourself, those boundaries, to make sure that you don't end up burning out and feeling guilty and doing things out of guilt. Because that's a tough balance sometimes to draw. Have fun, right? With your person too. Play games with them. You know, do things that are stimulating. You know, and keep that stream flowing for the right reasons for everybody. Cook. You know, enjoy eating. You know, if you can. We do just as much. You know, sometimes TV dinners or Amy's bowls versus, you know, homemade meal. But Bill is someone who rolls with the punches, but not everyone will do that. And so then we have to decide, okay, let's just stay calm for the moment and do what we can. If you feel that your needs aren't met, what do you do? Does anyone have any thoughts? Like when you really feel like you're at the bottom and there's only one way, and that's up. You know, you may decide that that means that you're gonna hide. It may mean you might decide on an unhealthy choice to cope. And I've been there. And it's not a healthy thing to do. It's not fruitful to bring you where you need to be and maintain who you are and move forward in a positive way. So what do? You're at the bottom. Well, again, do what you can, but make sure you reach out and don't just think that you have to solve it on your own, because that'll end up in depression, that can end up in an anxious state that isn't productive for anyone, especially yourself. Something that's helped my husband and I, and it's really made a difference, is bowel, of course, yes, constipation. You have issues with things that aren't fun to chat about. But intestinal health is a really big deal in our family, at least in our house, right? Because we've learned that if there's certain easy things we can put in our system, we're more regular. My husband is regular every day. Everything looks good, you know. But nutrition is a big deal. And it's more of a big deal than we, may give it credit for. McDonald's is so easy. It's so easy. I'm tempted, trust me. And I go there occasionally. But, it's important to try to eat as healthily as you can for you and your person, so that some of their symptoms don't have to be managed perhaps by meds, but could be managed in other ways. Are they cheap? Yeah, most aren't. But if you look hard enough, you can find them. And they're easy things. Psyllium, which is like a Metamucil type thing. Psyllium, different things that are on the market, but be careful when you look at that, because obviously there's a ton of stuff out there. And trust me, you can spend days just trying to figure that one thing out. And that's something that, if we have a caregiver group that's formed, I'm happy to share with you my ideas and what's going on. And I want to hear yours too, things that you're doing that are helping. Where do we go from here? Well, you have to go where you have to go, right? But remember to only take care of what you truly need to first. Let go of what you can't control. And then try to just take time to just be. And again, it takes work to be. It takes work to try to find the right spot to be psychologically. Some days at any given moment, you're stressed, you're strained, you're pulled in 3 different directions. You want to make sure you're trying to provide sufficient income for your family. If you're, a person that is in need of care, may or may not be able to provide. So there's a lot of challenges, but there's a lot of good. And amazingly enough, and it's so hard to see, there is joy in suffering. And I hear that and go, really? How is that possible? But little things happen that maybe we may not see. But if you take time to what they call smell the roses a little bit, right? You may be able to see those things. And then those tiny little things are little victories that can bring a smile on your face, even if it's just for a moment. And don't worry about the huge stuff. Focus on the fact that bowel movement was normal today. I'm excited, or whatever else you have to deal with, But yes, take care of you as best you can. Breathe. Try to eat well. All those things, they sound like something, oh yeah, sure, we all hear this every day. But there is something that builds up within you when you caregive, and that's fatigue. It's fatigue. Fatiguing, physically, psychologically, maybe even spiritually. And then you feel like you have to work harder to try to, bounce back. But be good to yourself. Try to find the happy moments. And remember that this is something that we don't really talk about much, because sometimes the people we're caring for can't do it. But if they can, there's some things that they can do for you. yeah, they have this disease, that's very true, and it's terrible. Sometimes if you can manage a conversation, you'll find yourself that they're actually helping you. You know, they're bringing a smile to your face, and that's part of that joy of suffering. You know, my husband, when he laughs with MS and some of the ways that the myelin gets, you know, messed up and chewed up and eaten, scar tissue, and it affects a lot of things. But one thing it affects is emotions. Whatever emotion he's feeling becomes exacerbated or elevated, right? So I can go in and say, wow, you know, let's tell me a joke, right? And I have a terrible sense of humor, so yeah, I am like really screwed there. But but my husband, you know, may say something kind of cute, or he'll see something on TV, or I'll just say, how was your day? He goes, good, how's yours? Oh, it was really, really cool. I did this. And suddenly he's laughing. And at first I kind of go, is that funny? And then I go, wait. It doesn't have to be. The fact is, yes, he's losing control of that emotion, but he's actually releasing some good chemistry out of that brain, right? So flow with it. Make it a happy moment. Take what you can for the right reasons, and allow what happens to just simply, you know, come to the front, come to the forefront. You know, sometimes it's hard to focus on the things that you think, oh, it's not a big deal. A little victory, a moment of silence, you know, a laugh at a joke, you know, and Alexa tells some really interesting ones. But yeah, something that helps my husband is Alexa, you know, TV, books on, I say tape, I'm really dating myself, and trying to stay engaged. Because even if though they may not seem like they want to, it really, it helps, it all helps. But yeah, there's joy in suffering. And make sure that, you know, when the day is done and you're going to sleep, that, you know, life really is a miracle. And every day that you have it is fantastic. We learn to cope with ourselves, we learn to cope with the situation, sometimes effectively, sometimes I fail. But it's really nice to know that when you have sort of a management plan, you know, you can kind of feed out to what you need, depending on what you're going through, what your, you know, person you're caring for is going through, to try to keep those scenes somewhat connected. And just make sure you don't devalue yourself. Don't devalue yourself. You know, you're doing the best you can at whatever level. So make sure you give yourself credit for that. Do you guys have any questions or any thoughts? Anything you want to share? All right.
Actually, I did. When you were talking about hiking, I happened to see on the news recently that like national parks, I think it is, are starting to purchase all-terrain wheelchairs
That is true.
for rent. Did you hear about that?
That is true, yes. Around here, I haven't seen it.
No, I haven't either.
I haven't seen it.
But I thought it was
yes,
a neat idea.
that's an excellent idea. They also have wheelchairs that are PVC pipe big wheels for beaches, right?
I've seen
We've
those.
experienced that. So, yeah, so there's a lot out there, and it's really neat, and I so appreciate that that you're here. I look forward to sharing some time with you, maybe at lunch.
Yes,
And-
so lunch is out in the lobby area, the atrium area. And what we were thinking is if you want to go out, get your lunch, and if you're interested in talking with Cheryl more about this idea of starting a support group, we had talked previously, and I'm sure that what we'll be able to accommodate is it being hosted here. We have next door 106A, and then we have the ability to make it virtual as well. So sometimes, you know, if you're a person that you're caring for, you know, you just can't get away, that there could be like a virtual login, or you could come in person, or maybe you have to, you know, as both Bill and Cheryl have shared, and we know that you guys are going through this too, you only have so many hours that you've got that caregiver coming in. So maybe it would be something, you know, one time you can come in person and the next time you have to do it virtually or something like that. But just really want to try and offer that. Years ago, we had caregiver support groups. There's still some specific ones, but we really wanted to be able just to say, if there's a need, we wanna try and, meet that need in the community, so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Get your lunch, come back in, and we'll talk about it. Yes.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I know Cheryl for many years, but, and she had spoken about putting together a caregiver, support group. And at the moment, I'm the one that's in between a youngster and a mom.
Sandwich
older.
generation.
So,
Yeah.
and my supports passed away, unfortunately. And my friends, they know, but they're like, well, do this, do that. They kind of wanna say, here, do this. I'm like, you don't understand, you know? So I think having a support group, and I tried the Facebook one, and it's not for me. I like to have somebody that,
Yeah.
you can take that few minutes and just vent and say, okay, this is what happened. Cause my husband, he doesn't understand. He doesn't understand that caring for a youngster and caring for elderly, is a big deal.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot out of you. So, I'm all for this.
Good, good, yeah. I look forward to getting a group started, and it doesn't mean that, others can't take the lead with me, this is a group effort. So I really appreciate your